Welcome to Downloadable Discontent, with the contents large and no extra charge. I wish we could say the same about the DLC we'll be reviewing today.
Who doesn't love Dishonored? No one, because they're all lying in a ditch being devoured by plague rats. It truly is one of the best stealth games out there that you'll ever find, and never in a game have I had such freedom to carry out my mission before or since playing it. You're essentially Dredd, the judge, jury and executioner, only with magic powers. But because you're watching this review, you already know that. As always, the disclaimer must be made that these videos are made in the assumption that you have played, or even better, completed the base game, so if you hate spoilers, you might want to turn back. What isn't a spoiler is that the assassin who killed the Empress at the start of the game is a man named Dord. Or Dowd, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but still, he leads the Whalers, who you'll meet halfway through the base game. What you didn't know is how much he's racked with guilt and frustration over killing the fairest lady in the land. Because of his actions, Dunwall has been plunged even further into chaos, causing the rat plague and the Weeper infestation to escalate. Shortly after doing so, you're visited by the Outsider to help you redeem yourself or flood the streets with blood. The choice is yours. At first, I didn't like Dowd's new features very much. His blink ability is a lot faster than Corvo's, and when you're not moving you can stop time with it. It took an hour or so to get used to it, but it became really handy, and halfway through I realised how much better it was than Corvo's own dash. He also starts the game with a level 1 Dark Vision spell, which replaces the Heart of a Living Thing in the base game. Through this you can find bone charms, and by looking at the Outsider's mark on the back of your hand you can be pointed in the direction of runes. Again, takes some getting used to, but it becomes likeable over time. So as you're getting used to your abilities, you'll meet the Outsider and come across a single clue that could lead either to your redemption or towards retribution. The floating guy in the sky gives you a word to track, and if I'm honest, it's one of my favourite names, Delilah. So Dowd leaves his standard contracts to his Whalers and is accompanied by his Lieutenant Billy Lurk, who you later discovered was a street kid who followed him all the way to his base undetected. And you have to admit that's pretty impressive for an 8-year-old. It was hard enough doing this as someone in their late 20s, early 30s. She doesn't do much besides commentate on different aspects of the mission, blinking in and out to say sup and give you her opinion on the current state of things. As you won't be talking to many people, it's good to have someone to keep you sane, even if that sanity is granted by someone in a gas mask, red robes and is armed with a crude machete. Speaking of gear, kitting out isn't the same as the base game. You don't talk to the inventor Piero for your items and upgrades, but instead you do this at the start of every mission. At first you'll have 3,000 coins to spend, but you'll notice how hard it is to re-obtain them to buy ammunition, potions and improved weapons. One of the cool features is that you can pay in coin for favours, which allow for items to be placed around the map for your convenience. These can vary from whale oil tanks for the destructive player, or simple runes for upgrades. They're costly, not to mention even further carved up content, but buying them all gets you an achievement. So when you've done that, every mission begins in the same way. Billy talks jive, someone's jawing at someone else, and you'll choose your way to navigate the map. However, just because this is DLC doesn't mean there's less work put into the missions, as you have just as much freedom as you did before, if not more. I always take the non-lethal route because it's more challenging and requires more calculation, plus I'm a fairly nice bloke. Just ask other people that are strangled and ditched in a corner in the past. If you go in non-lethal, expect to have a lot of work ahead of you, and there's a lot more risk to it too. Sure, you can just pump a guy with a sleep dart, or you can interrogate the son of a bitch in an electric chair, stuff them in a packing crate, and leave them to suffer on a remote island. That's far more interesting than blowing up a factory. Oh, okay, so that's kinda spoilt one of the missions, but in practice, it's still a load of fun, and there probably will be more spoilers considering that there's only so much gameplay I can show you. Oh yeah, we'll get around to that soon enough, don't you worry. The maps are pretty large and require little in the way of transition, so you'll be able to explore loads of buildings without having to face another loading screen in instance. Even better is that everything has something of value, and you'll really want to go looting to top up your dwindling supply of elixir and gear upgrades. An additional feature that exists solely to pad out the game are the recipes of Granny Rags. If you solve her riddles by gathering items, or people, you can earn yourself a rune. It's kind of fun, but it's only for players who have the time to arse about.
That's pretty much it for the gameplay. Now it's time to discuss the length and other things.
The Knife of Dunwall is a great slab of content, but it only contains 4 missions. My first playthrough lasted 4 hours, which had me going after all the bone charms and runes, plus a few moments of looting hither and thither. My second playthrough took less than 3 hours to finish, which was a lethal playthrough with minimal looting and exploration. I don't believe the time itself is the issue, but rather the lack of missions, and not only that, it's one of 2 parts. In the second part, the Brigmore Witches, you get a conclusion. So there's a DLC for the DLC. Fist fan fucking tastic! I'm fine with episodic tales. In fact, it's why I've been getting into a lot of TV shows based on existing intellectual properties rather than entire films based on them. But this, no, I'm not paying nearly £16 for the full story. It's a shame because I really want to get into the next part, but for $7.99 a pop I'm only going to get it when the price drops. The Knife of Dunwall doesn't have a satisfying conclusion either, but instead a vague cliffhanger as to who Delilah is and what the Brigmore Witches have in store for you. 4 missions is disgraceful, and I couldn't do enough in them to say that the Knife of Dunwall paid for itself. Now don't hear me wrong, these are damned fine missions, some of the best I've seen in Dishonored, but they don't do much for you if you don't have the second DLC, and they lack a lot of replay value for those who can't stand putting hours into collecting. I get that it costs more than the selling price to make, but when I can get the base game, which is significantly longer, we're talking about a good 15 hours here, for slightly more, you've got to be joking, and at least I can get a decisive conclusion, a full arc in the same box. If you can afford to spend that kind of money on 4 hours with a slight chance of replay value, I'd recommend this, but what's even easier to recommend is Bethesda just bundle the 2 expansions and sell them for all or nothing, otherwise it gives little sense of accomplishment or understanding of what I've done in this expansion. Like I say, these are fist-fantastic missions, which is all the more reason to piss and moan about how abruptly the content ends and how little it achieves at its runtime. If I'm going to buy the next expansion, it'll be on sale.
Until the next time, I'm Johnbonne, your number 1 source for number 2 games, and I hope you're content with this episode of Downloadable Discontent.